Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gents. This is DafubFilm&TV, and I have just watched the new episode 6 of season 1. Let's assume it's season 1. There are going to be more seasons of Ahsoka, and I've watched it twice because life got in the way, and so I wasn't able to do a review the moment I saw the first time. So I have rewatched it. Where to begin? The production value looks very, very good. Spoiler warnings again. Spoiler. If you don't want to listen to spoilers, go somewhere else because I'm not compass mentis enough to avoid spoiling the show for this review or reviews in general. So spoiler warning. It looks whenever there's CGI involved, it looks great. That was the case with season 3 of The Mandalorian. It's been true of the Star Wars stuff in general, particularly in space, on Disney Plus for a while now. The volume is used, although in many regards it's used a lot better in this episode than I have seen it in previous Star Wars content we've seen on Disney Plus. I still think they should be shooting and doing an awful lot more location shooting than they are. And considering how extraordinarily expensive these shows appear to be to make, certainly considering how much Secret Wars cost to make, about $200 million in that case, I would imagine this is a lot cheaper than that. But even so, by the huge amounts of money these shows cost to make, certainly by non-American foreigner standards anyway, they should be doing a lot more location shooting, and it would help with the perceived production quality quite a bit. But again, I'd say that this was, for a not insignificant degree, a volume fest, but it doesn't necessarily, they seem to have used it well enough. Like, it doesn't, like, again, so other people might have differing views. I mean, you could kind of tell when more kind of distance to mid-range stuff was CGI, but it was well done. And I think they should still be doing more location shooting. That would help, I guess I said, with the repeating myself again, with the perceived and actual production quality of the show. But it is what it is. In terms of what we get to see this episode, what do we get to see this episode? We get to see Sabine out in the open fighting some of the locals on this new planet, in this new galaxy they've gotten to, because they've gotten to this new galaxy. We get to see Sabine meeting up with Ezra Bridger. We get to see Grand Admiral Thrawn for the first time in live action flesh. We get to see his Star Destroyer. Actually, I think this is the first time we've seen a Star Destroyer in any of the Disney Plus content. Good old Imperial 1/Imperial 2 Star Destroyer. And it looks very good. I won't say any more about that. You can look at it if you haven't seen it already and draw your own conclusions. There's clearly overall indication, both among the troops under Thrawn's command and under the ship itself, there's been a bit of a wear and tear, to put it mildly, while they've been stuck out here, as it were, in exile. And they've obviously taken some losses as well. But again, it looks very, again, the CGI sequences all look very, very impressive. Where do the problems come in? The problems come in again, Ray Stevenson, I think it's Ray Stevenson, who's playing Balon Skrull or Skull or whatever it is. Formerly, we now know General Balon, from Balon's, I can't pronounce the second name properly. But his character was apparently was a Jedi during the Clone Wars, and we now know was a general. We find this out because upon the mention of his name, introducing him to Thrawn immediately recognizes the name and general and so on. So I'm sure he is fully aware of Balon's history and his history as a general and so on. They seem to get on perfectly politely. In other words, then since he's no longer part of the Jedi Order, that's all, very well, fine and good. And, kind of it goes from there. the Night Sisters, or was it the grandmothers or the great mothers? I can't remember the term. I think it's the first time we've seen the Night Sisters in full garb in live action. They looked very good. The sequences again on the planet are all whenever there's CGI involved, they all look very, very good, very, very high quality. The problems come down in a number of areas, as I see it. First, if you haven't watched the Rebels animated series, you don't know that Sabine and Thrawn have had previous dealings, so he recognizes her the moment he sees her instantaneously. You don't, so there is some history there. You don't know anything about Ezra Bridger unless you've watched the animated Rebels series. So when he turns up, if you're not a fan, it wouldn't necessarily be again, if you're just a standard normie Star Wars fan, or even a more hardcore Star Wars fan who just hasn't watched any of the animated shows, and I think the majority of hardcore Star Wars fans out there may tick that proverbial box, then it's not, his appearance just isn't going to have the impact that it could or should. And they haven't, they should have spent quite a bit of time this season, again, for what is the vast majority of the normie Star Wars fan audience, and also quite a few of the kind of core / hardcore Star Wars fans who also haven't watched the animated series, both building up Ahsoka's backstory in general to familiarize themselves with the character and get to understand her. And I don't think what we saw last episode vis-a-vis Anakin was enough. Maybe if it had run throughout the entire course of that episode, it would have been, but I don't think they probably should have done some like dream sequences where she's remembering things that have happened in the past throughout the run of the season to kind of build up her history and her backstory. And doing that to a degree also with Sabine and Ezra might have helped build up the stakes here. As it is, that hasn't been done. The work, I don't think, for the non-animated show fan base is the work hasn't been done to properly introduce them to the character. Both the three key characters, Sabine Wren, Ahsoka Tano, and Ezra Bridger, have not been properly introduced to them, and they've not been able to develop an attachment to these characters and get invested in them, and therefore the kind of stakes for the majority of the audience of the show, my guess is that they're not. It's okay, yes, this is supposed to be a big moment. This character turns up, who's a fan favorite. The problem is the character is a fan favorite for a small chunk of the hardcore fan base, or I don't know how small or how big, but let's say half or less of the hardcore fan base for Star Wars. And so for the other half of the fan base and for the normie fans, they just shrug their shoulders and move on. And I think that is a growing problem with the show. I've seen people who are kind of Star Wars fans, OG Star Wars fans, kind of genuinely quite relatively hardcore Star Wars fans, who have been kind of nonplussed by this whole show, because they haven't watched the animated series. They're not going to go through watching the animated series, and they're just it's a whole big shoulder shrug for them. And I think that's a huge problem, both for the show, because again, as I've said previously, the main purpose of the show needs to be, above and any Star Wars content from here on out, needs to be to rebuild the IP, rebuild the brand, which has been very badly damaged by a variety of creative decisions that have been made since Disney took over Lucasfilm. In terms of Thrawn, they picked a member of the Skarsgård acting family who did the voice work for the animated Thrawn character. The voice is fine. It's the same as in the animated show. That's, okay. The character himself, it's been some time since I read not Timothy Zahn. I can't remember the original Thrawn trilogy of Star Wars books. I think they came out in the 1990s into the 2000s. I have read them, but that was quite some time ago. And I have also seen Thrawn as depicted in some of the video games. And to be honest with you, firstly, I think there's been comments online that he's got a bit of surplus material, shall we say, around the waist that Thrawn does not have, and maybe they didn't have enough time. This is the thing as well, along with the lightsaber duels that Rosario Dawson has been involved in. It's possible they didn't have the time to do proper kind of physical training for her to get her really proficient to an acceptable standard. And it's also possible they didn't have the time to get the actor playing again Thrawn to lose the weight. But this also may be something of a problem as well with just in terms of quality in Star Wars and there's content on Disney Plus. They may be on something of a treadmill to be constantly churning out new stuff, to just keep getting new stuff again, new content on Disney Plus to maintain or grow the subscriber base, which they may not be at or near any at the moment or any time in the foreseeable future. So they're not. It's possible that once they've got a cast, they don't have 6 months to a year. I think it was like 6 months to a year of training for the cast in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith for what is his name? I've forgotten his name again. I always do this. My apologies. Who played the actor who played Anakin both in the last episode and in the Clone Wars trilogy, or sorry, the second and third Clone Wars trilogy movies, and also for Ewan McGregor. They got extensive training. You can look at the lightsaber fight sequences in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. There's a level of kind of speed and proficiency there that is so far, certainly in any sequence where they aren't shooting from distance and using stuntmen and women, that the actual actors clearly lack, because either they didn't bother to give them the training, or they didn't have the time to, or maybe it's a combination of both. But in the case of Thrawn, he shouldn't be overweight, although I'm not saying the guy's fat, and I'm sure he's, in terms of his age range, the actor is probably in his 50s, or 40, maybe it's late 40s, 50s. It's a bit hard to tell with the makeup, but he doesn't quite look the part because of the weight. It's not like grossly a huge problem, but it is they should have, if they had the time, they should have gotten him to lose it, one. And two, there's also the Thrawn character is physically, like the Thrawn character from the animated show is a lot younger. I would say 30s to 40s in the animated series. And as Thrawn is depicted in various other kind of extended universe media, games, books, if he's ever been in a comic book, I'm sure he's there as well, as a much kind of both thinner, just generally tighter, physically at least younger character than the actor playing him. And maybe they got him cheap, or maybe they just, again, this is Dave Filoni's project, so he's just brought in all his friends who worked for him during the animated show, which is a bad thing in my view to have done, and it's hurt the quality. They could have gotten someone physically better suited, whether they'd be a better actor or would have had a better voice. I don't know. But so far, and he appears to be wearing a wig as well that doesn't look particularly well, it's it doesn't look good enough, frankly. Now, again, this is, these are, again, in terms of the production quality, when it comes to the sets, when it comes to the CGI, it's all very good stuff. But again, it's not where it needs to be on the acting / casting front. If a Rosario Dawson is physically incapable of, for whatever reason, even with extensive training, is physically incapable of doing lightsaber dueling to the standard set by Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones, then she shouldn't have been cast in the first place, even though she looks great at the part. There's still not a huge amount of differentiation between the female, kind of lead female characters in terms of their demeanors and personalities, which isn't great. It's just, it's, I haven't really looked at really in any depth and kind of the reaction, because I am recording this later than my last review. So there's a good few kind of other reviews out there I should go and have a look at once I've done mine, and I will. But the response does not seem to have been to this episode as positive as it needs to be to help again rebuild the IP. It's, again, the best thing in it is Ray Stevenson. He is, as Balin Skull, whatever, how you pronounce it, he's the best thing in it. I mean, his dialogue is pretty, although one could argue there are critics out there saying the dialogue in general is very kind of threadbare at best. But he works with what he's got very, very well. He's kind of got this kind of very kind of physically impressive presence because of his size. That works very well for the character, and it's very kind of imposing. What is there else to say? I mean, it's just, yeah, we got a little bit more story and story progress. I assume the next 2 episodes will be them, whatever the altercations. Well, I'll get to, I suppose, the next 2 episodes, it'll be them either, getting back to their home galaxy and some kind of maybe confrontation cooking off with the New Republic. Assuming that happens, so we might get a big space spectacular battle between Thrawn's Star Destroyer and the Rebel fleet when he gets back. Let's assume that happens. But I mean, they could theoretically kill him off, but that would be a waste of what is effectively, in terms of the extended universe, he's probably the best bad guy that the extended universe has produced. And if he's done properly, maybe there's a little criticism in terms of the casting. One, for those kind of more kind of hardcore fans that are, that are more aware of and fans of the extended universe stuff, from whether it be from the video games, the books, and so on, Thrawn is probably the single most greatest antagonist that the IP has produced, apart from Maul in the animated series. Where I think they really kind of plussed that character in the Clone Wars animated series. Thrawn is the most significant antagonist, the best antagonist that the IP has produced since Darth Vader and the Emperor. And maybe that's also kind of what that's affecting my perception of the perception of the characters as portrayed here. He's got this belt around his waist. I don't know if that belt is around his not around his waist, around his midsection. Obviously there to tighten his upper clothing around his uncannily large frontal mass, shall we say? And we're not talking about his unmentionables, just to be clear. And he just doesn't look, in the face department, the age, the shape of the face, he doesn't look like Thrawn as he's portrayed in terms of imagery of any I've seen. He might look a bit closer to Thrawn as he's portrayed in the animated series, but even then, that's a version of Thrawn that's kind of in line with the artistic kind of design and the art design of the Rebels animated show. But again, for the bulk of the core fan base, or at least maybe half the core fan base who haven't seen the Rebels animated show, he makes the difference even more jarring. He doesn't look like Thrawn as portrayed in the books or in the video games. He looks similar because of the hair, which I think is a wig, because of the makeup, and I just think he's wearing eye contacts to make his eyes red as well. But that's and he's got the relevant the appropriate clothing on, but he just doesn't look enough the part. And while animated fans might love the voice he's using, again, for the rest of the audience, I think it's possible that they either it's not going to benefit the character or the show enough, or B, they might actively dislike it, so it might end up hurting the show. So I'm ready to start looking at the reviews and the responses on social media and so on with quite a bit of trepidation. As it stands, like you, again, the production quality for the most part is there, but there's issues over. This episode is a longer episode, but in the series overall, and this is true of most of the Disney Plus shows. Again, it was particularly extreme with Secret Invasion. The episode lengths are just too short. In some cases, some of the episodes are too short. You get too many episodes over too many weeks, where in terms of the core story, not much, if anything, happens, and making it feel kind of long drawn out and boring. And because the episodes are short, frustrating, or when the episodes are short. And these are all kind of symptoms of a greater problem that if they're to reiterate, fix the IP, they're going to have to deal with, and they're going to have to, and there's an awful lot of improvement for, and they haven't got there yet. And in terms of just the writing and the story, things have taken too long. There have been too many episodes where too little has happened for, over, like, literally you might have 2 or 3 weeks back to back where not enough happens, and the episodes are frustratingly short. And now you get to this, and if you're a big Ezra, I watched the Rebels animated show. I watched the whole thing. It was all right. I don't particularly hold it necessarily any particular huge amount of esteem. I don't, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a kind of an Ezra Bridger super fan. So when he turns up at the end, if you're big into the character, maybe great, because, and I say maybe because he's only in at the absolute tail end of the episode, and he's been told nothing. So as far as he knows, the Empire still exists. As far as he knows, he doesn't know how Sabine got to him, what she had to do to get to him, the price she had to pay, the potential negative consequences, and so on. So I would imagine we'll get that all next week. But if you've got, this it's a case of drawing things out. So the episode is over 40 minutes long. You get to the planet, and then at the very end of the episode, you finally find Ezra, and then it's, roll to credits. And it's just, not enough happening core story threads wise on a per episode basis. Too many episodes where little to nothing happens again, and the episodes are frustratingly short. And this is a problem with season 3 of The Mandalorian. It was a problem with Book of Boba Fett. Obi-Wan Kenobi had a whole raft of its own problems of quite significant severity. And then, it's from the standpoint of someone who did watch the entirety of the animated series, who did watch Rebels, and I've also watched is it 2 seasons we've had so far, of The Bad Batch. It's not good enough. And if it's not good enough for someone who's watched Clone Wars, Rebels, and The Bad Batch, I can only imagine how not good enough it is for those who haven't, or those who just didn't like those shows and may have watched them but didn't like them. So I am kind of really, my interest is really piqued in terms of, what the response of this is going to be. And again, from a kind of a strategic overall business perspective, it's so far the show is not doing what it needs to do, which is to be of a high enough quality to begin rebuilding the IP, begin rebuilding the brand after a huge amount of damage has been done to it. And if it's now in a situation where Lucasfilm has basically been put onto a compulsory conveyor belt because they need to constantly churn out content based on their IPs for Disney Plus, because Disney isn't willing to have, let's say, 2 or 3 different, unique shows on the air at any one point in time or in production and available for streaming, which means they have to have constantly new Star Wars content, constantly new MCU content, because they've got nothing else in terms of new. Well, they do have some other stuff in terms of new original content, but nowhere near enough to, and even then it's not, original content. I think the what's it called? Not the House of Hair. That they have a ride at the Disney parks called House of Horrors or something. It's like this kind of a scary, spooky ride. They've made a movie based on that recently. It did get a theatrical release, but it's gone on to Disney Plus, and that might have done quite well. I don't know. But again, it's based on an existing intellectual property that they've owned for quite some time. They're at least you can say about Netflix. I mean, again, Netflix has been something of a barren wasteland for me for quite some time. I watched Witcher season 1 and 2. I haven't so far gotten around to watching 3 because now that I know that Henry Cavill is leaving, I'm not terribly enthusiastic about the idea of bothering to watch season 3. I really liked Daredevil. I really liked Jessica Jones, particularly the first season of Jessica Jones is fantastic. And I've only been kind of intermittently interested in what they were offering me since. Arcane, I thought, was very, very good. Certainly just in terms of the animation. Other people have criticized the story, but I thought that was, fine. Again, animated show, maybe lower expectations than if it was live action. Apparently One Piece, which I know nothing about. I know nothing about the original manga or anime or anything, but apparently that's quite good. I may watch that and review it for your enjoyment. If you're interested, let me know in the comments below. But as it stands, at least Netflix comes up with new IP on a regular basis, or acquires other IPs or licenses other IPs to make content based on them. But Disney isn't doing that, and certainly not anywhere near the rate they need to. And so they're dependent on Marvel content, and they're dependent on Star Wars content to just keep the eyeballs on screens and retain subscriptions. And as a result, they're on a treadmill on both IPs, and they don't appear to be able to stop to provide the time, allow for a much longer time for writing the episodes, allow for, an extended period of time for the cast to get in shape, to be trained up in terms of lightsaber dueling if that's relevant to their role, and so on. And it's hurting the quality of the shows. The writing, again, if the writers had more time, maybe they could, put together shows that, that are in episodes that are better written, and shows seasons that are overall better written as well. But we're not seeing that. And then the quality control, again, the writing in particular, the dialogue, it's not where it needs to be. There bring criticisms about, I think, I've been thinking about, I'm not going to go into the details on it. I might do it a post Ahsoka once all the episodes are out, post-mortem. But there are a number of ways, both others have mentioned online and that I've also thought of myself, where this could have been, when it was still in the drawing board stage, redone in a variety of ways that could have hugely improved it, although it might have ended up costing quite a bit more money. But again, the core purpose of this show at this point is not to get ratings, which it hasn't been getting, depending on who you talk to, but to instead get, again, rebuild the IP, rebuild its reputation. They need really ultra high content that not just a particular part of the core fan base likes, because it's derived from, it has their favorite animated characters in it, but that the core hardcore fan base and the normie fan base will really, really like, and get them really, really enthusiastic about the IP again. And this is still better. It's still better than Season 3 of The Mandalorian. It's still better than the Book of Boba Fett. It's still better than Obi-Wan Kenobi and that nightmare. But it's not good enough to rebuild the IP, and it's still got significant structural flaws. And then, of course, there's the fact they've got lightsabers, but they won't chop people's limbs off. They've got blasters, but the shooting action isn't kind of as explosive / violent as it was in the prequel movie or in the original trilogy movies. Look at the, for those who want to reference, look at some of them. Again, maybe I'm talking about older versions of the older cuts of those movies. I don't know what Lucasfilm or Lucas himself might have done to them to tone them down since. But if you look at like some of the shootouts between the goodies and the stormtroopers on Bespin in The Empire Strikes Back, there's like when the blaster shots hit walls, you have explosions, and there's, as you walk past dead stormtroopers, you actually hear things like sizzling, like their flesh is sizzling from the blaster hits they took. I don't know if they've taken that out since. They might have, but that kind of sticks in my, in my memory. Maybe I'm imagining it, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. They're not doing anything like that here. And so, there are no shootouts in this. Well, there is one shootout in the episode. But even so, it's better, but that's not saying much considering how much of a train wreck the last couple of Star Wars shows have been, not to mention the Secret Invasion, a complete disaster and a total waste of money. But what is there to say? It's not good enough. It's not pointing the IP in a new direction. It's not rebuilding the level of quality the IP used to have, and it's not rebuilding the prestige, and the momentum the IP used to have before Disney had their wicked way with it. So again, 2 more episodes, but again, if they do turn it around like they did in, season 2 of The Mandalorian by having who turn up, now I'm not saying they'll have Luke turn up in the final episode or 2 of the show, but they really if they're saving the entire season but just one big Shazam episode at the end of it, that's not enough. That really isn't enough. If you're expected to, have a I wouldn't say watching this has been a chore for me, but it's Secret Invasion really was a chore within a matter of episodes. But it needs to be, just something to do to occupy one's time. You know what I mean? You've got to, or fill one's time because you've got nothing better to do. It's got to be better than that throughout the entire course of the season. And so if they do pull off some sort of wow moment that gets everyone talking about the final the show because the final episode, but it's been, to the quality we've seen so far. I mean, again, I liked, Member Berries worked on me with Anakin in episode 4, but this, it's if it's not good enough for me, as I said already, if it's not good enough for me, it certainly won't be good enough for people who never watched the animated shows or did and don't like them. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Any suggestions you might have for how I can improve my videos or any other content I could create for you, let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe. And this is, if you haven't already, this is DafubFilm&TV, unimpressed to say the least. Signing off. Toodaloo.